Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next session. I don't believe that any conversation around Node-RED would have been complete without home automation, and so I'm very excited for this lightning talk by Øivind. And so ultimately, again, Node-RED has been in this space, and I'm sure many of us tinker around with a variety of different devices in our automation stack. So Øivind, I pass you the mic for a brief introduction and the talk that follows.
Great, thank you, Vladimir. As I said, I am Øivind Heggland, and I am from Norway, and I will be talking about how I started with smart automation and how I ended up with Node-RED and the end result of that. So I will now share my screen, find it again. There we go. So my talk is called Grow Your Own Smart Home. As I said, I was Øivind Heggland, and I'm a product owner and agile coach. I've been using Node-RED both privately and professionally since 2018, and this talk is going to focus on the private part of the Node-RED. In early 2018, I started with a smart lock because I wanted to automate my door entrance, and at the time there weren't that many solutions. And after looking in internet, I found something called Augur Smart Lock, which helped me make my lock smarter because I couldn't remove the whole lock. I had to only implement the internal from the inside and switch that. And after some tinkling with that, I were able to make this work, and this started what would be my smart home automation. After using the lock, I soon discovered I wanted to have some lights and ended up buying Philips Hue, and I installed some light strips under my kitchen cabinets. And then sort of it spiraled from there, and I figured out how could I do more. Philips Hue seemed too limited, and I needed some better way to control more devices. After browsing the web for a while in Norway, I found a company called Futurehome. At the time in 2018, the smart home market weren't that mature, and you had things like Home Assistant and Home Share, but at the time I wasn't that fond of getting into it and doing all the what was needed to make it work. But I found Futurehome, and it seemed simple enough, and it had a good app, and the setup was easy. After using Futurehome for a while, especially for controlling my lights, I found a automation hiccup, or what I felt was wrong. I used motion sensors such as you have like IKEA ones, the first generation, probably see it there, and switch over to more the newer IKEA ones. Jesus, it was black. Yeah, but after a while, those sensors detect you when I entered the room. But Futurehome had a logic where when I entered the room, the timer for when it should go off started, which meant that if I were moving around in the room, the light would always go off because it counted down. For me, I would rather like the light to go off after a certain amount of time after there have been no movement. After looking through the forums, a Futurehome employee had created a blog post talking of something at the time I didn't know existed, and that was Node-RED. And I started with automating the light for me, was the right way, which essentially meant that the light would go off after a certain amount of time. After automating one light in my house, I started to automate more of them, and I generally use the trigger node to trigger the light on as well as off. And it's sort of it gets more complex as you try to do things. Making things happen is easy, but when you go and you think what do you want to do when not when lights are not supposed to go on, then it starts to get complicated and the flows. Yeah, it gets more work. But after some time, I got finished with the lights, and I found something new I wanted to automate. That is garbage. When I'm supposed to take out the garbage, at my hometown we have a web page which I can log into, and I can see what type of trash I'm supposed to take. And this is the flow that shows this. And what it essentially does, it goes on the web page, it scrapes the page, find the trash day for the current day, and it finds the different type of trash. And the bottom part here runs every Tuesday, and it goes through the data from the web page. And it checks what type of trash I'm supposed to take out, the bio. It's called like food waste, garden waste, plastic, etc. And then it sends me then it's nags me on Google Home for what type of trash I supposed to take out. I have a big timer, the green one, which only takes the days it's supposed to check for, because I only take out the trash every 4 months. The end results I show in a dashboard where I show the day, 1st of 10th, it's a Wednesday in this case, and it shows me that I'm supposed to take out the garden waste and food waste. And Google Home will then nag me every hour until I click the big blue button here, which essentially says I have taken out the trash. I also have a dashboard. For me, automation is supposed to be not invisible, but it's supposed to work by itself. So my dashboard is, in my opinion, relatively simple. I have the house related things, which essentially is manual mode and visitor mode, which I toggle to make the house dumber when I have visitors. It also shows me if I am home or my significant other is home. This is a way I use for home automation, for automating if we are away or not. So it could trigger, for example, the vacuum cleaner. I have the garbage logic, the display, as well as a temperature controller, which probably is the most advanced flow I have, and I will show you that a bit later. The rest are the different rooms, and they essentially is a way to override the light automation if I wanted to force the lights to be on. This is a big flow and might not be easy to see, but this is the flow I have for controlling the temperature in my house. It essentially controls a heat pump. And the reason it's sort of starts to get so complicated is because the placement of the heat pump, which wasn't my decision, it was installed when I moved in my house. It's in the middle in the stairs, which means on the first floor where the entrance is in the first floor, and we have a cellar. The issue is that during summer we have a dog and she is upstairs in the first floor, and I need to try to keep her as cool as possible during the summer, and I needed a way to control the heat pump in a way that it will focusing on cooling upstairs during the summer, but also it will stop cooling if it gets too cold downstairs, because you need to have a balance. And the same goes the other way around. During the winter, I needed to keep a okay temperature upstairs while still having not too hot downstairs. So this flow tries to control that, and it also checks the weather API to check if the outside temperature is supposed to be If the temperature difference between what I want versus inside versus outside is too great, it will be much harder when it comes to controlling the temperature. Also, when it comes to automation, it's important to keep what's generally known as the WAF factor, WAF acceptance factor. Because when I start to automate things, you suddenly get some ideas, and I got one idea I thought was really good. Why not automate the lights in the bedroom? That sounded like a good idea at the start. I had some checks that if after 9 o'clock the light would only go 9 o'clock in the evening, the light would only go on one time, and then it would never go on until we have left the house the next morning. The issue there was that there were some problems with the system I ran it on. It was a Raspberry Pi, and for some reason it restarted every night, and I hadn't taken that into account. This resulted in the light turning on in the middle of the night. Safe to say, I don't have light movement detection in the bedroom anymore. Of course, I had to automate the dog. This is a way so we don't have to keep the door open during winter. And I trained her to click the button when she wants to come inside.
Happy wants to go inside.
And then on Google Home will be telling us that Happy, which is the name of the dog, wants to go inside. That was a fun. So that's sort of a way I have made the dog smart. This is a quick diagram of my setup of the smart home. Essentially have Node-RED as a central piece of the home system. It controls different devices such as sensible air, which controls the heat pump. I have a smart mirror, which is another Raspberry Pi, and that's the black square you see on the right. It's the difference, the bus times, and it says you're sexy and you have the time. I also run Home Assistant because that controls another heating panel I have, as well as I have smart locks, and I still have Futurehome because the devices I have connected is still controlled through that, as well as different movements devices. I have a lot of different flows. It controls Google Home, the garbage collection I talked about, the dog related things, bedroom, and I have bathroom and stairs and everything I have made over the years. My main thing is when it comes to smart home, you have to start small. It maybe goes from there, and you have to stay curious and try different things. But you end up sometimes with something that you enjoy, and sometimes it's a frustration because you have made something that you thought would work, but it ended up being not as good as you thought. And that
Awesome.
was
Øivind,
my
thank you
talk.
so much. Really good presentation. Like I said, I think most of us have dabbled in home automation. I personally have some temperature control and some humidity control in certain areas. And as you've mentioned, sometimes your significant other has different thoughts on how things should be running, but that's an entirely different conversations. There's a few questions that came up in the chat that I think are relevant as we run out of time. So number one is how hard do you think it would be to scale something like this into a more of a building slash apartment complex solution? I'm assuming someone has an idea of a full rack, server where you can give access and permissions and have all sorts of different control for an entire building, perhaps based on this.
I think that should work. It's just a way of just making the parameters that's needed, make them variables and changeable in a way. So in a way, it should be scalable. The only thing is the devices you talk to that they need to be sort of paired specifically to your home, like the lights and everything. That's not something you can automate in a way, but it should be fine to sort of make the whole most of the system agnostic, so it
Mhm.
doesn't need to be specific to a person or a house. So I think it could
Makes
could
sense.
work.
Should be an interesting project. Again, I know there's a
Yeah.
lot of companies that do software in that space, but I've not heard of solutions built using Node-RED there. What are your thoughts around Node-RED versus some of the alternatives? And you've mentioned obviously one of them, and someone in the chat said that they're using them both together, but are trying to migrate more towards Node-RED. So I guess like I was curious to hear your thoughts on how do you split up on both sides, and what are maybe the pluses of Node-RED?
I started with sort of with the smart hub from Futurehome, which was basically it just after a while it became sort of stupid because it didn't do what I wanted. And then I started
Hmm.
with Node-RED because that's the really way to, for me at least, to make the logic work. But I see that in reality you probably need a combination. As usually it's Home Assistant and Node-RED because you
Yep.
can in Home Assistant you can install Node-RED as a plugin. So
Hmm.
you sort of need them in a combination. I think is better, especially if you want a dashboard and you're not really like a developer or you're more sort of not used to technology in a way. Home Assistant's UI and everything is easier some in
Hmm.
some aspect, I believe. So I believe the combination is probably the best way to go.
Gotcha.
If that
Let me throw one last question before we wrap up. And it's more on the protocols and the hardware side, right? So there's obviously a lot of different solutions that work over MQTT, that work more over Zigbee, Bluetooth. So I guess like your thoughts, having dealt with a lot of various hardware, which protocols do you normally lean towards and I guess are maybe easier slash kind of more reliable to integrate into these types of solutions?
Generally, it's like Zigbee and Z-Wave. Zigbee, like at the beginning, there was Z-Wave, which essentially is a proprietarily, it's very locked down. It needs to be approved or validated. But when after like IKEA and all others started with the Zigbee protocol, it became more common, easy accessible. So I generally use devices now, which is Zigbee because it's there was cheaper generally before,
Hmm.
and Bluetooth also was cheaper, but now they sort of it's a cost versus functionality, and I think Zigbee protocols is generally easier, especially if you want to have more local control of the whole system. There are some
Gotcha.
devices which uses Wi-Fi, but
Hmm.
then you need internet to make it work. So I would say Zigbee is
Gotcha.
probably the most easiest one and uh, the one that is commonly used now.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. For those who are watching the session, we do have a shorter break now, so 5 minutes before the next talk by Flowfuse and the CEO ZJ. If you have a few minutes, there's also an opportunity to look at the booths under the Expo button of the lobby. So if you click on that button, you can go and talk to the individuals that do have booths, one of which is, of course, Flowfuse. But in any case, we will see you in 5 more minutes for an interesting talk on AI, MCP, and a whole variety of, I want to say, advanced nodes on Node-RED. Thank you so much, Øivind. Again, really appreciate it. And we'll see everybody in 5 minutes.